Kat. Hello, Kat.
Katya, are you there?
Oh, oh, hi.
Hi, hi.
Um, so, Camille, I don't know if it's fine. Like, if we have to communicate in Spanish, I'll talk to them in Spanish, and then keep the
Yeah, no,
conversation.
I understand. My original name was Camila, but I changed it to Camille because I just like that name better. But I don't know how it stays better. It's like my family hasn't called me by that, so you can call me
Okay.
Cam or anything like
Okay.
that. So
Cam, awesome. Cam.
yeah.
All right.
Oh, by the way, if I don't understand the question or anything like that, could you type it out?
Of course. Yeah. No worries.
Okay,
All
sure.
right.
Thank you.
It's recording. So, yeah. First, I want to explain to you what is this about. Like, we're like a team of students, 3 students, from Universidad Iberoamericana. So that's the
Okay.
name in Spanish.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're located in Puebla, which is like 2 hours away from Mexico City.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, we're making a research project about how is it the life of people with disabilities in the virtual world. So internet, yeah, like in whatever platform, and we want to understand like their struggles, how other
There's a
people see
lot.
them. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I bet, and more for you that um, there's not a lot to, there's not a lot of improvements. I think in a lot of platforms for like hearing disability. I think so, right?
Yeah, I'm hard of hearing. So I was born with moderate to profound deafness. So on both ears. So
Yes.
I ended up being in speech classes until like 12th grade. And
Oh
then
wow.
my family's Cuban, so we know Spanish, but I could not learn Spanish as well. So I had to learn English first. So that
Yeah.
also affected with language as well. 'Cause a lot of people, my family's like, "Oh, you're Cuban, like you have to speak Spanish," and I'm just there like it's not really my fault because it's more difficult to learn like the certain letters. If you can't hear certain letters, it's gonna be harder to pick up a language, especially your like mother tongue. So it can
Yeah.
be really hard juggling two languages. Yeah,
Oh, for sure. And you communicate with them in English.
yeah, I do. Yeah, but my mom called her family in Spanish. So my dad too, but
Oh,
me and my
okay.
brother are the only ones that don't know Spanish that well. But my entire family they know Spanish. So
Oh, okay. I see. Awesome. Um, so you can catch up some words, right?
I understand Spanish. I just can't write it well or like speak it that well. I do Spanglish, so I mix the Spanish and English with my grandmother.
Yeah.
She doesn't know English that much, but we try to make it work.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I met one guy that he learned Arabic to speak to her, no, to his grandmom, and it was like, wow, respect. Yeah.
That's
Um.
funny.
Yeah. So first, I wanna ask you, what is it? What is it to be a person deaf of hearing in a virtual world? Like, yeah, what are your main problems?
Like the obstacles that I go through,
The obstacles? Yeah, yeah, the obstacles. Yeah.
like the struggles that I go through. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For streaming and content creating or everything, like in general.
In general.
In general, um, honestly, like my entire life, I didn't really think of my disability as an obstacle. I didn't really care about it much, so I didn't. I just went with life, um, as if I didn't have one. So there were some obstacles in terms of like communicating with people,
Yeah.
especially in jobs and phone calls. I don't call people for that reason, so I have insecurities with that, which I have to work on.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit difficult. It really does mess with insecurities and mental illness in general,
Yes.
so it can be really hard to talk to new people, for example, when I moved to high school, I my accent or my speech impediment, it wasn't very good. So a lot of people mocked me for it. They used to bully me for it.
Mm,
So yeah, it takes you to sort of like make your speech clear, and it was really hard for me. So a lot of people would laugh at me sometimes.
mm,
I would try to ignore it, but sometimes it's sort of like I would say that's the main obstacle, just communication in general, talking to people,
yeah.
trying to understand them especially. So there's that. And then for content creation, it's actually a lot easier in my opinion because well, one, when you're streaming, it's not that much of a big obstacle because you're talking to people. Like you're not necessarily like expecting an answer. It's just texting, just reading through everything. But I tend to not play with new people because it's hard for me to understand what they're saying exactly. Because over time it takes a while to get used to how they speak and their accent or whatever. So it takes me a while to adjust. So I try not to play with new people. Sometimes I will, and I have been, which is a good jump. But overall, I think honestly, it's not difficult. It's just some people definitely have questions. People ask like, "Oh, why do you sound like that? Why do you speak like that?" And I have to explain why. Um, but overall, the positivity, the encouragement is very good. I would say when I was younger, it was definitely a lot harder. A lot of people bullied me online for my voice, but I was very young and I didn't have a good speech impediment. So,
Okay. And how do you deal with all these questions that are asked to you? Do you ever feel like frustrated or
well,
um
it's
yeah.
funny because the one question that always gets asked is, "Where are you from?" People
Okay.
always
Yeah.
think they
Accent.
always think, yeah, they always think I'm from the UK or China. I know it's very weird, but I was like, what? A lot of people thought I was like from different countries, but I was like, no, I'm Cuban. I just don't. I just have a speech impediment. It doesn't have to do anything with my accent. So it's definitely it's kind of annoying that it gets asked a lot, but I don't mind answering it. I think yeah, it's just really my speech impediment and where I'm from. So I'm always telling them, yeah, I'm from the USA, but I'm Cuban. But at the same time, like it's just my speech impediment. Not I don't really call it an accent. It's just a how do I explain it? Like an
It's
accent,
just
it's a little bit different.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. It's just
yeah,
it's a different way of talking, right?
yeah. It's just the way that you put out. It's just a little bit different because if you can't hear that well, it
Yeah.
whatever you hear is what you're gonna speak. So it's a little bit hard to get a clear, clear speech and stuff like that. It takes years. So um definitely take a while.
Yeah. And for example, with all the people you play, are they hard of hearing as well? Or they're just random
No.
friends?
I grew up with hearing people. So I do not understand deaf culture. I don't really understand hard of hearing culture either.
Hmm.
So I just grew up with hearing people, and that's why I never really focused on my disability. I started focusing on it last year, just
Hmm.
last year, and I used it as a way to help other people with disabilities. And I realized, like, wow, I should have done this a lot sooner. There's a lot of people who struggle in video games, and they can't hear that well, and it's hard for them to play video games and different sound cues, right? So that's why I use Dead by Daylight, which is a sound oriented game, right? It's not that visual, it's more of sound. So I realized, hey, I play the game a lot, I'm really good at the game, so I think that maybe if I make tutorials, I can help out people with disabilities and provide like alternatives to help them play better at the game. So that's what I did. And eventually very, very popular Dead by Daylight streamers caught my work and I got shouted out and it was just incredible. It happened this summer and the biggest Dead by Daylight creator really liked my tutorials and he put it on his thing for everybody to see.
Oh wow,
So
that's awesome.
yeah. I definitely think disabilities in video games is very, very not spoken of that
Mhm.
often. I think that had to change, um, because there's a lot of disability, disabled people, and people who play games are not only abled people. There's also people who struggle with eyesight, hearing, mobility issues as well. That one's a big one. So
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh, and do you think well, firstly, like it was awesome like how you discovered this group of people that never picked up like they were struggling in video games, right? Because well, you said like
yeah,
you started to make the tutorials and you found a
hmm
lot of people with like hard of hearing. Um, so
yeah, yeah, I did.
that's amazing. You got to like to get that insight in the video game mm, field.
Yeah, I
And
I think it's unspoken because I know a deaf player that plays that game,
mhm,
and she told me she never got to making videos about it, and I was like, why not? I mean, nobody had ever made tutorials, any guide videos, nothing on Dead by Daylight. Very, very few for other games as well. And I
yeah.
was wondering, but why? I feel like disabled people don't exactly know
Hmm.
how to do it, like in terms of experience and stuff like that. Because I've already had experience in making videos, talking to people,
Yes.
so I might not understand how they feel, but I feel like maybe they were too afraid to start doing things like that, or just afraid of how to do it because maybe people might judge them or bully them or whatever. But I
Hmm.
think like people should just go for it, even if you're disabled, you're still putting something out there to help somebody, even if it's one person.
Hmm.
You never know how good it could do, and I think the biggest issue is that they just don't speak up as much, or people don't really care about it. Honestly, like I've noticed that people don't really share that or
Hmm.
care as much, but they really should. It's important. I think it's a great, you know, it's an amazing goal, and I think people should work towards it together, not just one
Yes.
person. And
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so I
Awesome.
hope that
So
answers the
like
question.
yeah, I got the feeling that you started first like just trying to express yourself and then you start to figure out how to
Yeah,
help these people with the same disability as you. And yeah, talking about the groups or like making the change as a group, how do you feel the community is? Like, are you really united? Are you guys really united, or you are all by yourselves, or how you support each other?
that's the whole
Like,
question. um, I don't really I don't really unite myself with other people. I'm normally just on myself, you know.
okay,
I think I found it hard to join other people, especially people with my own disability, because I they surprisingly the deaf culture and the hard of hearing culture are drastically different from what I know. So
okay,
when I try to talk to them, when I try to understand their experiences, it's drastically different because some of them grew up with deaf parents or hard of hearing parents. However, my parents didn't really do anything. I mean, they did, but they didn't necessarily educate myself on it. They thought my disability was something that shouldn't be talked about. So I
okay,
thought it was a bad thing when I was younger, and I used to get mad at my mom for that. So because of that, I didn't educate myself on it. I didn't feel prideful of it. I just thought, okay, yeah, it's just a disability. It's not a big deal. But
mm-hmm.
then it sort of changed over the time, and I started getting frustrated. My parents like, why didn't you not educate my like me on that? At least tell me it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And I feel like that's definitely one thing that parents should do because from that point on, that will help the child like accept who they are and accept what they have, and
Yeah,
then that gets them united with people with the same disability as well. And I feel like there's a little bit of like a wall between me and other people with different experiences, and sometimes it's hard for me to like fully understand how they feel because I've never been prideful of it, and other people have, and that's a great thing.
oh wow, okay, yeah, like I've like since I found you, I started to watch YouTube videos about deaf the deaf disability, and it's like it's so much different, like how they feel sound. Like for example, there was this girl that was explaining she could only hear one in three words because her nerves took longer to like heal. So like one word she heard, she mildly heard the next word, and the third one was like didn't make any sense to her. And then until the fourth word, she was able to hear again because her nerves were like healing through that process. So I feel, yeah, it is like really different backgrounds, but
Yeah.
you are all working for like consciousness, right? And to avoid coming generations to have these type of problems, and just to be more included in the world, right? To not struggle as much as
Yes,
you guys.
and I was in regular classes as well. I was never paired with disabled people at all. I my mom thought I was extremely smart. I don't know why, but she put me into regular classes. She never wanted me to be with disabled people because I don't know if she felt like they were not superior to me or something like that, or maybe I didn't deserve to be there. But honestly, I think she took it the wrong way. Maybe she didn't realize that
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing to be in regular classes. I just don't. I just hope my mom wasn't thinking in the way of, oh, you shouldn't be with disabled people because I don't think you belong there. And
Mm.
so I think that's sort of the problem necessarily with parents.
Okay.
They don't understand the whole culture behind it, or not
Yeah.
willing to teach their child about the culture. They should learn themselves and then teach the child at least. Even sign language. Sign language is amazing, right? But my parents strongly they didn't agree with it. They told me I did not need to learn sign language. They told me you sound perfect. You sound perfect. You're fine. Like you don't need sign language. But then I was like, but it's literally the language for deaf people and hard of hearing people. Like why should that not? That's not a bad thing at all. But yeah, that's what sort of like bothered me. My dad used to tell me to like thoughts about it, and that sort of like created some conflicting feelings. Just and thought of me, it just made me feel like I wasn't really,
Yeah.
adapted that way
Hmm.
with my disability. They just acted like, yeah, you just have hearing loss, it's nothing else, right? But of course, it's a lot more, and because of that, with my experience with videos and stuff like that, I decided to take the plunge and help out people
Yeah.
and do it in the way that I want to do it. And even though it might not be the same as, uniting myself with people that are disabled, I wanted to do it my own way,
Yeah.
to support them from my end. And, I understand how hard it can be, especially with video games and life in general. So,
Yeah, it's crazy how, because we've interviewed other people, and we've seen like they accept their disability until they're like 13, 14, and it's just like mind blowing because they've been struggling for their whole life until that age,
yeah.
and they start working on their disability on that year. So I don't know. I think it's really
I,
hard
I
to
feel like
imagine
I feel like
how it.
disabled
Yeah.
people are restricted in a way. So I don't agree with putting them in a box. I think
Yes.
disabled people are completely different. If I was in that class, maybe they would have like restricted me even more just because I'm disabled and I need help. But I think it really depends on the person. If you don't necessarily need that much help, like
Yeah.
you don't have to be restricted in one tiny box just because you're disabled. Disabled does not mean certain things. There are different levels of hearing
Yes.
loss or different levels of blindness or anything like that.
Hmm.
So I really think we should give help when they need it, and not
Okay.
necessarily just because they're disabled. So if somebody told me, oh, I can take notes for you, I would be thankful. I've had a note taker as well, like,
Mhm.
and sometimes I wouldn't be able to hear or catch up as fast as I could, but it would be nice to actually challenge yourself, even though it might be hard. It can help, train yourself, to understand people a little bit better, to get over that fear of the insecurities of talking to people, communicating, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, So I don't think people should be in a box. And as for taking a very long time to adapt itself, I think that might be part of the problem because
Yeah.
people don't like when things are different. They don't like when people need accommodations or, special treatment.
Hmm.
So I feel like they should allow them to get help when they need it, but also figure out what they want in the end. Because we're all disabled. I mean, sorry, what? My bad. We're all
No,
like,
that's okay.
yeah, I didn't mean to say that. We're all basically capable of pretty much doing anything that we want. We just cannot be restricted in one box.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bad thing when it comes to school, work, stuff like that. And I think it's great to challenge yourself. Even if you're scared, that's fine. It's gonna be over after a while. It's not gonna be forever. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, it's very interesting the point you told me of not enclosing them in a box because they're so different, like between people with disabilities. Like, yeah, they're so different. You can't really approach one issue the same way as the other. Um, do you started YouTube and Twitch as a hobby, or you want to make it uh, as a way of living, for a
um
living?
I started when I was 12. Um it was a hobby at first. I do Beyblade, by the way. So yeah, I started YouTube for 6 years when I was 12. I finished at 17. But
Mhm.
it was a hobby, but then it started turning into like a passion, and then it made me realize that wow, like I love creating videos. I love being able to share that with the world and inspire people that way. And
Yeah.
then that came with my love of photography,
Okay.
photographs, video editing, filming, anything that's like around that area. And then
Mhm.
eventually streaming. So I would say definitely for a living, but now I'm doing freelancing for video editing. So people are paying me on Fiverr to make their videos. And so I'm just doing a bunch of things, trying things out. And now I'm a little bit burnt out from content creating. So I'm taking a little break from that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So you've been building your path, and you've discovered you're really well at communicating. Because I realized people are engaged in your Twitch videos. So like they comment like whatever you do. They're they're not like uh just like a passive audience. They're really into it, which is pretty cool because they can listen to what you say and like act from whatever you say, which is pretty cool. And do you usually have in all your social media friends that also do the same type of content as you, or do you think there's not a lot of content uh, related to what you do?
In terms of disability wise, no,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Very,
Oh,
very
okay.
little, probably very little to none in the niche I'm doing,
Wow.
which is Dead by Daylight. Yeah, I
Mhm.
would only I was the very first one to even make a video on helping disabled people. So in that area, especially for Dead by Daylight, is not spoken well, but I eventually did talk to one of the dev members of the game, and I did provide some, recommendations on what to do to provide more accessibility settings in the game. And now they have subtitles. They just
Oh,
added subtitles in the game, which is great. And there's a lot of other recommendations that I also gave out, and I'm just hoping they can implement that because they do have colorblind settings. So I was like
okay.
wondering why not an auditory setting as well. It might be abused by regular players. Like people can just turn it on and just use that even if you're not disabled. So I already know a way of how to fix that. Um, but yeah, definitely there needs to be more content around that. Even with games in general, it's very, very lacking. Games like Overwatch, Sea of Thieves, stuff like that, Valorant, for example. There has to be more exposure on that topic.
Yeah.
And with that, of course, we do need disabled people to get together and make videos about it and explain. But then that margin is very small. Sometimes it's a very small amount of disabled creators, so it's a little bit hard, but definitely not impossible. So
Yeah, definitely. Because now you're kind of, I feel like you're inspiring people, and the more you do content, the more tools these video game developers and platform developers focus on people with disabilities, right? And for example, you said like now, was it Twitch that has a colorblind uh, tool?
yeah, Dead by Daylight has colorblind didn't. They just added it after 3 years. And a lot of people were complaining about it. They were acting like, when are they gonna get added? Like other games have an option, so why not you? And they finally added subtitles into the game, so it was just recent. So I'm just hoping from this point on they can learn from that and try to implement a way to also help hurricane players because it's a little bit more difficult than colorblind.
Yeah,
So you don't want people to be abusing that option and using that to get wins in the game, for example. So it wouldn't be fair. So there has to be a way to provide accessibility settings